April 16. The Good Man. Luke chapter 23, verses 50 to 56. Now there was a man named Joseph from the Jewish town of Arimathea. He was a member of the council, a good and righteous man, who had not consented to their decision and action, and he was looking for the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. And he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud, and laid him in a tomb cut in stone, where no one had yet been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb, and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. Luke wants you to admire Joseph of Arimathea. He was a good and righteous man, verse 50. That meant he was faithful to God's covenant and experienced its blessings. Like some others in this gospel, he was waiting expectantly for God's kingdom to come. He was also a member of the Sanhedrin, but had not consented to its condemnation of Jesus. Perhaps its leaders had avoided summoning to the crisis meeting anyone whose loyalties they suspected. Matthew and John tell us explicitly what Luke only implies. He was also a rich man. He already owned a tomb in Jerusalem. And he was a secret disciple who, until this point, had lacked the courage to confess it. Matthew chapter 27, verse 57. John chapter 19, verse 38. The Sanhedrin was a very select group of well-connected men. Word of mouth travelled fast in Jerusalem. Joseph must soon have learned what had happened. Jesus was dead. It was now or never for Joseph. He stepped out of the shadows, went directly to Pilate and asked for the body. This was not without risk or cost. If Pilate granted his request, and Joseph personally handled Jesus' body, he would be rendering himself ritually unclean. But he knew that otherwise, Jesus' body would probably be thrown into a common grave where the bones of many criminals already lay, perhaps right there at the skull. Was this the derivation of the name? Some things are far more important than ritual purity. Pilate was probably relieved. Now he could relax and forget about the problem of Jesus. Little did he know. But for Joseph, there must have been 3 hours of feverish activity. It was already past 3 o'clock, and the Jewish Sabbath began at 6 o'clock. Not a lot of time to get to Pilate for permission, get back to the skull, arrange helpers, and carry Jesus' body to the family tomb. Why does Luke pay so much attention to Jesus' burial? For several reasons. The first is that he removes any doubt about the reality of Jesus' death. The Roman soldiers had made sure of that. Joseph himself had handled the body, and the others had helped him prepare it for burial and carry it to the tomb. The second is that Luke makes clear that there was no confusion about the location of Jesus' burial place. Joseph's tomb was new, and a variety of witnesses knew where it was. Then, thirdly, Luke adds that the women went to prepare spices and ointments to return after the Sabbath to anoint the body. In other words, nobody, despite what Jesus had taught them, was expecting Jesus' resurrection. But before we come to that resurrection, we should take another look at Joseph. Of all the gospel writers, Luke was most like a historian in his method. But historians can also be poets and theologians, and there is something poetically theological about the way he frames his whole gospel. His story of Jesus' life begins with him being cared for by a man named Joseph, who places him in a borrowed resting place, in which no baby had ever been laid. It ends with Jesus being cared for again by a man named Joseph, who lays him in another borrowed resting place, where no man had ever been laid. The story has come full circle. Another Joseph has received Christ into his heart and life. At the turning point of Luke's Gospel, near the beginning of the journey to Jerusalem, Jesus had said that discipleship meant following one who had nowhere to lay his head. Chapter 9, verse 58. Now, Joseph had come out into the open as a disciple, whatever it might cost. So he gave up to Jesus the place where he had planned to lay his own head. At the cross, Jesus had given up what was his for the sake of Joseph. Now Joseph was giving up what was his for the sake of Jesus. That is what it means to be a disciple. Today's reflection. The gospel is sometimes called the Great Exchange. Christ took our place and gave himself for us. But that leads to another exchange. We give ourselves to Christ and live for him. Is there a way in which the Spirit is prompting you to recommit yourself to this second exchange?
This devotional series is being produced with the kind permission of the Good Book Company. A link to the book To Seek and to Save by Sinclair Ferguson can be found in the description below.